Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. My guest today is Laura Patranella. Laura is a passionate reading teacher with 11 years of teaching experience, specializing in at-risk student populations. She has taught in the general education classroom in grades 3 through 8, and as a dyslexia and reading interventionist in grades 1 through 8. Currently, Laura is an upper elementary teacher focused on the intersection of the science of reading and learning. I think you're going to like this one. Good morning, Laura. Thank you for joining me on Better Teaching.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Gene. It's great to be here.
I want to talk a little bit, dive into your introduction, because you've had some interesting experiences in your 11 years of teaching. And most of it literacy based, the emphasis on literacy. And so you have taught grades 3 through 8.
Yes.
You've been an interventionist in grades 1 through 8. What was the order of that? Kind of give us your history at your school. What that looked like.
So my first year teaching, I was at a 6th grade only campus. And as the first year teacher in a pretty large department, I was given, they say there's that, like you give the first year teacher all of the kind of the tough kids. So I had a really heavy load of special education, and we have a really high population of L students. So they were all in my class, and I had a 2-hour block with 6th graders.
Laura, excuse me 1 second, just to clarify, because everybody says things differently. L students are English learners.
And I had to think too. I was like, what do I call it? It changes every
English
year.
Learners.
Honestly.
Okay, go ahead and feel free to
English
say L
language
from
learners.
now on. English learners.
Yes. Okay. That was just trial by fire. And we were an improvement required campus, and we ended up, it's just very expensive to run a 1 grade level campus. So after that year, we all got put onto 2 middle school campuses. And so after my first year, I taught 8th grade for 2 years. And I just always loved special education students. I loved working with them. And after 2 more years teaching 8th grade ELA, I asked to become a campus interventionist, which wasn't really a position at the time. They would typically put space in ELA teachers' days to have an intervention class, and we had a set curriculum with that. So I requested that we concentrate all of the intervention into one teacher, so that half my day was tier 2 intervention sections, and then the other half of my day were sections that were dyslexia only. And so,
okay, a couple questions. Number 1, dyslexia. How are you using that term?
So in Texas, we use the IDA definition, where dyslexia is a reading disability that's phonological in origin, meaning that the parts of the brain that are used to process sound are at a deficit compared to we use IQ to determine, and then also there are other reading subtests.
Okay, so you had
that's our definition.
You had students with dyslexia, and what was the other group?
I would just call them tier 2 students, kids that were unsuccessful on STAR, which is our end of year high stakes test. That's how they were chosen for that.
And so they were referred to you.
Correct. Yeah, that was the counselors in charge of scheduling. So they look at test scores and decide who gets placed in those classes.
Okay. And were they placed in classes by grade level, by abilities? How were they placed?
My dyslexia classes were 6 through 8. You would have a range of grade levels in those classes. But then the tier 2 intervention, those were only 7th and 8th grade sections. And they would just be, I didn't have 6th graders in them. It was just the seventh grade section and then an eighth grade section. I had
And
several.
then we are coordinating with their general ed teachers. Was that the idea? Or were you their language arts teacher?
It was an extra reading class. So they had an ELA and then they lost an elective to be in the what we call, I forget what it was called, but they lost an elective to be in my class.
So kids always
Punishment.
enjoy that, right? Middle school kids, they come
Yeah.
in.
I
All
was
right. So
everyone's favorite teacher.
yeah.
No, they really liked it. When a student can't read, they know they can't. And when it's sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, they've carried that burden through years of education. If a student is in eighth grade and is at like a second grade reading level, that's basically the year where they stopped making progress. It's not
Right.
like when you get to a certain point behind, you're really not making a lot of incremental growth. You just stay stuck until you get that instruction that you need at your level. That's really where I learned to lean into the direct instruction because kids just thrive when they have those clear expectations and
So when
routines.
you say direct instruction, you talking about capital D, capital I, Engelman direct
Just
instruction,
like
or
Rose and Shines.
okay,
I was
okay,
following a strict scripted curriculum that was designed for middle school students who were reading 2 to 4 years behind grade level.
okay. And those were for both groups, both the dyslexia and
No, I had a dyslexia specific curriculum for the dyslexia. And that's something it was, you hear a lot OG aligned, Orton Gillingham, they're one of the original programs. So this was OG aligned, but made in Texas at a service center. But very similar compared to samples that I've seen of both OG and then also like the Wilson system is another really popular dyslexia program. So very similar.
okay. A couple questions come to mind as you're talking about that experience. So how long did you do that as an interventionist that way?
I 2 full years, and then I was in my third year where in October an opportunity they had a retirement at my husband's campus. So I actually was able to transfer and I worked with my husband for 1 year at elementary. Middle school is very hard and the dynamics of intervention classrooms at middle school are a major challenge. And so while I was doing my best to let my concerns be known, there were just some situations in class that made it really impossible to teach.
Okay. So when you transferred, then what was your assignment then?
I was teaching fifth grade. That was like COVID year. So I
Okay.
taught fifth grade. That was wild. Okay. I
So
show up
I'm
in
just laughing
October.
because it's tough to do middle school intervention and then COVID. Okay.
Yeah. I got there in October, and every fifth grade teacher was teaching all subjects. And then we were able to convince campus and district admin based on data that we should go back to being departmentalized because like my husband was the math expert, you have someone that had taught science for 7 years, and then I have the ELA background, so we convinced them to go back to departmentalized. So then we started rotating the kids through. So then I was ELA for about 3 months, and then we went home and never came back. And that was that year.
Okay. Okay. And then in your bio, you said you were also interventionist for grades 1 through 8. So we heard about 6, 7, 8. What about 1 through 5?
The COVID year, I ended up teaching third grade math and science to students where I reported to campus, but the students were all at home. So I taught virtually science and math third grade. And that was fun. I do teaching math. I'm not as like emotionally invested in math because it's really not what I'm passionate about, but so it's like a less easier year to not be concerned about how perfect my instruction was.
So interventionist, dyslexia. Now you're
Then two
back.
years like gen ed, and then
Yeah.
I we had then the year after that, the full COVID year where I was teaching the third grade math, I was
Uh,
in a different district up in Dallas. And then we came back to the San Antonio area. and I was a 6 through 8 dyslexia only interventionist split on 2 campuses for 1 year. And then I was able to move down and do elementary dyslexia for K through 5 split across 2 campuses.
So is that also you're in different districts, but in Texas, do they have a agreed upon curriculum that you're going to follow? Like in your
I was using the same curriculum. So
okay,
we
okay,
just left our hometown for a year, came
okay.
back. So it was the same curriculum.
Okay, so you have all of this going on, intervention specialist. And when did this science of learning, science of reading come into your life?
I guess science of reading was really what you learn when you become a dyslexia interventionist. The program that we used was a really long training in terms of typical training. So it was like a 2 week initial in person training where they came to our district and taught us how the curriculum works. And then we had periodic updates. So I really, I never knew it as science of reading. It was
Right,
just
right.
how you
Yeah.
teach reading. And then that really started, I guess I gained like a broader awareness of the issues when that Sold a Story podcast came out. And that's where I started to understand more of the broader context of how kids are taught in elementary school. So I'm still a new teacher. Our district, for all the years that I've been in it, has had an HQIM, and we never really used some of the more vilified curriculums that are out there and in that sold a story conversation. I don't really have a before and after as far as the Gen Ed.
That's really interesting in that uh, you walk in, you say, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. That's all I know how to do. Okay, so that was because you had this experience almost serendipitous. Like now you've got your own classroom and you can bring all these things in. What did the curriculum look like that you were using in the general ed versus the more scripted things in the interventionist
Yeah, so I would
position?
say that really now that I'm back in the gen ed and in upper elementary where, that decoding element is still a really important piece of instruction, it is like I'm bringing together the skills that I learned when I was teaching the tier 2 intervention at middle school where it was prescriptive but really like the rose and shine process of steps, and then combining that with the knowledge of the 6 syllable types that I learned in the dyslexia. And then also this past year, just learning, being on Twitter and being a part of that science of learning conversation has really, it's not so much that I've learned new things, it's that I've gained a better awareness of how what I've been doing fits into existing models. I've just been following what I was taught as good instruction, and now I have more confidence in the way I run my classroom because I've gained that broader context of where these ideas fit.
Is there still an intervention program at your school?
Yes, very fortunate to be in a district that has an intervention block. We have a 45, every grade level has 45 minutes that is protected intervention time. And that's when the dyslexia interventionist pulls her groups. And then you also have the special education team pulls kids out. And then we have a gen ed interventionist who kind of works with our, I know this is a hot button term, but like our bubble kids, the kids
It
that
is
are,
Texas, by the way. You
yes,
are
we
an
live or
accountability
die by
state.
that
Yeah.
star. All about star.
So
Better
the
words.
question that I have is based on your experience, and now you have your own class. Are you able to bring a lot of those things, not just the science of reading stuff, but do you do a lot of intervention, in class intervention with the
Yeah. So one cool term that I just heard this morning, and I don't know, it's tier 1.5,
uh-huh.
which I think is like such a fantastic way of describing what a lot of high quality tier 1 instruction looks like. Upper elementary is complicated because as far as um, your decoding and your language comprehension are starting to become so intertwined that you really can't separate it when you're teaching kids. So there's that Scarborough's reading rote model where all of the strands start very separate and then they all get woven together to create that skilled reader. And when you're in upper elementary and middle school, especially with like vocabulary instruction and those multisyllabic words, everything is so connected. And so not only is it connected in ways that are challenging to kids that really push them to understand new concepts, but also like as far as working memory is concerned and being flexible in like your vowel pronunciation as you're trying to pronounce an unknown word, you're really getting into like generalization and the adaptation if you're thinking about the instructional hierarchy, because they've learned these decoding skills and they have basic concepts and understanding of the world. But as the pronunciation of words gets more complex, they have to be more flexible in how they approach sounding out a word. And then they're also getting these new layers of meaning as the content gets more specific. So it requires a very structured environment. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of being confident in your instruction, and some of the more pernicious sort of structural components that hang on from like the guided reading era of like whole language instruction and prioritizing small group, is understanding that really fantastic instruction can happen whole group in a very structured and upbeat way.
And I think another one of the main benefits of the structured program that you were talking about and the programs that you use, the direct instruction, is the teacher gets to actually see the kids learn. They know it
Yes.
works. And that's another virtuous cycle, is that if you see the kids learn, you become more confident in the learners. You're able
Yeah.
to go faster and they're more confident. And because one of the things that I always talk about is if a teacher's ever in an interview to be hired, and one of the things that they will always say is, I have high expectations. But when you watch them teach, they don't know that the kids can do more because of the lack of training, or they haven't had that experience that you've had to see, wow, these kids can do a lot more. And then to paraphrase your answer about these kids in the general ed setting, they can do more because you understand how to present it, and they're still going to have gaps that they need to fill, but you can go on. So you, Laura, you had these great experiences. What about teach? And I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus because you know better, you do better. But have they had the same trainings that you have had?
Theoretically, in Texas, they have. I know now, new hire, if you're getting certified in Texas, you have to take a science of reading teacher exam, and you would have to prepare for that. And that's all designed around like the 6 syllable types and understanding those principles of literacy. And then we also had reading academies, which I did not do because I was not in a grade level that was required to do it, but I heard from coworkers that I guess it was all over the board, and then they've been reported on as far as how well they worked and if they worked, and they were immense amount of time, and many teachers were not compensated for the time. So I don't know how much of a lasting impact that's had on teachers coming into the profession. I do know that our HQIM, like you're very limited in Texas on curriculums that satisfy the phonics component. We did have legislation that requires a phonics component in your district for K through 3. So there is really only one option that's available in English and Spanish that satisfies that phonics component. And that's the one that we use in our district. And it's in there. It's in there. It's scripted. I think where we're not seeing results is probably a reflection of dosage, because as far as what I've looked through, it's aligned to the science of reading. That I'm not sure every kid needs different amounts of repetition, and that curriculum does move really quickly. I'm thinking that the results are more a reflection of nuance and dosage and understanding how much of what kids need.
Yeah, that's a real common, what you just stated, I think is real common in curricula everywhere. Just is it implemented? Is it implemented? And I like the word you said, dosage, because that's another way to say, are we doing the repetitions? Are we giving the time necessary that the actual research that was done in this program? Talked about your experience, how you learned this. And I think that it's very, I just want to say, I think it's very cool. I always love to work with a teacher like you that says, I learned this, we just called it something different. And now I know. And then you talked about how you learned it. You talked about a little bit about what's going on with teachers. And when teachers have to take a test, I'm always leery of that because the skill to pass a test is a student skill, not a teacher skill. And some people are good test takers, and some people don't even know what they know because, anyway, and that was you, Laura. You don't even know what you know. But then there's one other component, and that's the administration. So, what's the administration? What do you think the administration needs to know, not only leading the instructional program, but even being even more granular, like coming in and watching you teach? What do you think? What are the most important things that they should see during a lesson?
I think I keep thinking about like poor proxies for learning. And I think a lot of what campuses and districts look for aren't necessarily proof of student learning. In particular, when I think about small group time. So if an administrator comes in and I'm running a small group and they're all engaged, but then what are my kids doing that are not with me? And are they able to do, is that grade level work? And I think that administrators really need a solid understanding of what grade level content looks like and even content specific look fors as far as quality instruction. And then I guess I used to be more, I used to think that teachers should have more freedom as far as what was taught in their class. And I used to appreciate that saying of building the plane while you're flying it, which was introduced to me in like countless, there was always this same old advertisement that they would play about like building the plane as you're flying it. And I used to really embrace that.
Yeah.
But now, like, I don't want to work nights and weekends anymore. And so I've personally spent time over the summer, like really digging into my HQIM, which I had a very poor opinion of leaving this school, like leaving this past school year. But I have learned so many more aspects of it that I didn't have time to investigate during the school year. So I think either district wide or campus wide, like there needs to be experts in the materials. And that's one conversation. That's the what. And I think that we do really need to be tight on what you're teaching. And then separate from that is the how. And are we asking teachers and supporting them in developing classroom routines that actually drive learning versus check a box that's higher up on our evaluation scale?
You've mentioned something that I love when I hear people talk about things they've developed. I think of, well, off the top of my head, I think of the writing revolution, which is very
Mhm.
much driven by explicit instruction, how they present the material. And if you do that program, you are doing explicit instruction. So there's a side benefit. And it's like you described. It's like I was doing this OG and then I got to learn about the rest of this stuff by studying closely how I was delivering the instruction. And so I think a good curriculum teaches the teacher along the way as well. And if it's good, you continue to learn from it and then you continue to appreciate it. hopefully that's what the type of curriculum that
Yeah,
you have.
so I love the Writing Revolution, and they are very explicit in encouraging you to use all of the strategies. So I think this is a really good hypothetical where there's such a difference between like being a Writing Revolution campus and using Writing Revolution strategies. And the impact and the difference between the two, I think, can't really be understated because, especially when you consider the student experience, if they're in a school where the 5 question words and kernel sentences have been something they've seen since they were 5 and 6 years old, at least orally, and then moving on to print, when you get them in fourth and fifth grade, they can take off. And when it's like we're holding our kids back because we're too afraid to upset people. And I understand that. And it's complicated. Like I
Building the plane. We're building the
right.
plane every year.
Yeah.
Oh, Laura, this has been, I really enjoyed this. I think your experiences are an important example how you can learn through these programs. And if the district and the state is doing a good job, you're learning good things because you have good programs. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. How would you like I was thinking about kind of common teacher types, and I feel like no matter where teachers are in their career, there's always a part of them that doesn't know if they want to stay with the career. So, like, how do you build campus systems that would increase buy in and really motivate teachers to embrace the harder parts of the career?
Two things. Number one, a lot of the teachers who are unhappy, and I've had thinking of one teacher in particular as I tell you this story. She was just not a happy person. I think she was a second or third grade teacher. I don't remember exactly. And we worked with her on explicit instruction. And it took her, she was a more veteran teacher, she was an experienced teacher, and it took her a little bit longer to pick up some of the things we were talking about. And I was worried about her. I went back the next year and watched her teach. It had all been internalized, what we had talked about. It just took her a little bit longer to get it. And she was a different person. She was a different person. So I think it's just like kids that are motivated when they're successful. If we can provide to help them be more successful, what the kids are learning more easily, they're happy. They feel successful. That's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is I think some people are teachers and some people aren't. And we have to say, it's okay. Hey, Laura, go do something else. You could do anything. What's the saying? The graveyard is full of people who thought they were indispensable. It's just go do something. Life's too short. And if you find out you miss it, come back. But we have to do the best job we can as administrators, supporting teachers, and not feel like a teacher's a failure or we're a failure because they want to do something different. Look at your career. You left and then you came back. You said, no, this is, and for whatever your reasons, it doesn't matter. That's the other thing. Don't tell me, oh, you want to leave, Laura? What's your why? What's your why? Why are you here? It's not about that. It's about your life. So that's the way I feel about it. You help them as much as you can, and then you are happy for them as a human being if they're moving on to do something else. And then we'll get another person in here and we'll do the best job we can to train them to do a good job.
Sounds good. It's complicated.
It is. We're dealing with people. People are
Right.
complicated.
Right.
Laura, it has been a pleasure. Any final words? Any bits of advice for folks? I know they can find you on
Um,
Twitter.
yes, I have a somewhat defunct Substack, but it's elementary, which I'd say that's my guiding principle. It's a joke, and it's important to have a sense of humor with all of this. But I think we make things harder than we need to. It's like
And
you said, we're dealing with humans. When you're a teacher, you can't take the child out of the instruction.
amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Laura, it has been a joy. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X, at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's tesscg.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused Adaptable Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles.